Hey everyone, welcome to our weekly Wednesday stream. Today we're going to be streaming, I think, some Overwatch. And as usual, feel free to ask any questions you have. I'll do my best to answer them. And we'll also talk a little bit about some stuff that's coming up. So, yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Let's see. News. So, Penroses are pretty much, I think, taken care of up to about 12.7, maybe a few taken up to 12.13. And now we're mostly working on getting out all the updates for the app. A lot of the app updates are up and things like that. So if you're on Windows or Android, definitely download your AudezeHQ app update your firmware, and check out some of the videos on our YouTube channel for all of that stuff and how to do that. What else? Oops. If you have questions about how to EQ your Penrose, I have actually 2 upcoming videos about EQing your Penrose. Those should be up later this week or early next week, so keep an eye out for those. There's also a number of presets for Penrose. There's a pack of presets, 5 presets, which are recreations of the Audeze Mobius presets, and we also have some presets for music that we've created for the Penrose. Chris Barons, myself, and other folks at Audeze tuned those in-house, and we think they're a cool way to expand the functionality of your Penrose, to use it for music and other specific, gaming needs, things like that. So those are cool. Check those out. Again, there will be a YouTube video about those, as well as a video about how to make your own EQ presets, tips and tricks for how to best do that. So if you have questions on that or you're curious about that, definitely check those out. I'll link to those in those videos. Today we're going to be playing some Overwatch. Let's see, Flex. And as usual, if you guys have any questions about any of the stuff I just mentioned or anything Audeze related, just let me know. Overwatch servers are still up. Supposedly, hopefully, we'll find out. I'm on the West Coast, and yeah, we seem to be up. Hey, Metal571, how are you doing today? It's good to see you, buddy. So I don't know what I just jumped into there, but not good. Also regarding Penrose EQ presets, we'd love to hear from you guys about what you are doing with your EQ presets. So feel free to, comment or share them. Chris and myself have been talking about maybe getting a way for you guys to share presets you've created, and I think that would be really cool. So hopefully we can do that at some point in the future. I think community sourced presets for the Penrose would be super cool. And of course, community sourced content is always a lot of fun to see what kind of creative things people come up with. So there's that we're hopefully working on. Fingers crossed we can get that done. What else is new? Yeah, happy holidays to anyone who's celebrating Christmas, Hanukkah, anything December, January holiday related. New Year, 2021. 2020 is almost over. I'm sure lots of folks are probably happy about that. Good riddance. Another thing. we're working currently on also coming up with, if you haven't checked out the previous preset packs, check those out. But we're working on coming up with another preset pack, and we'll have more in the future, specifically for individual games. So a Penrose preset pack, which is, say, optimized for Cyberpunk 2077, or optimized for RPG or RTS gaming, or a Skyrim preset, or an Overwatch preset, say. So that's something that I am working on currently, creating those presets for you guys for specific games. Stay on the lookout for those. We'll hopefully have the first one coming out soon. And by soon, I'm hoping in a week or two. So, as I mentioned, just stay on the lookout for new stuff like that. We're definitely trying our best to support Penrose on an ongoing basis like that. And I think that's the presets are a really cool way to do that. So, excited about that. Yeah, I'm really excited about it, actually. It's very cool, and it's there's some very cool and interesting things about the Penrose when you're EQing it that are a little bit different. Again, I'll be talking about this in my upcoming video, but just to kind of give you a sneak peek, if you're EQing your Penrose, it's generally a better idea to cut instead of boosting. And there's a variety of reasons for that. So the first reason is that amplifier gain always comes at the cost of noise. So say you boost low frequencies, that's going to use up more of the headroom, because low frequency signals are, they're longer and wider. They take up more bandwidth when you're playing back audio. There's also the fact that whenever you boost a frequency in the Penrose's EQ, the auto gain function of Penrose, which is totally intentional, is going to turn things down a little bit. And the reason for that is that if you only have a limited amount of headroom, which the Penrose amp has quite a bit of headroom because it's balanced, which is very unusual for an amp like that, is the volume will go down because it's going to keep you from distorting specific frequencies. So if you boost the bass a ton, right, past a certain level, the transducer is not going to be able to handle that, even a really good transducer like a planar magnetic driver. And planar magnetic drivers take EQ generally a lot better than dynamic drivers. I'll talk a little bit more about why that is, but you can also check out our website's tech articles if you're interested in sort of that specific detail. But basically, they take EQ, better than dynamic drivers, but they'll still distort past a certain point if you try and boost a frequency too much. So, oh geez, I'm not doing well. Yeah, you need to compensate with overall gain if you boost a specific EQ frequency. Right, because you don't want to cause compression. So, and eventually distortion if you push it too far. So, cutting is always a good idea because the automatic gain function of Penrose, will kick in if you boost too much. So, one way that you can actually work around this that's really cool is you can only cut, and you can leave, say, the bass regions intact relatively. And what this is going to also give you the benefit of doing is to make things quieter, because when you have the automatic gain control kick in, you're turning up the volume then on your Penrose, right, physically to adjust for volume, but that's also increasing the amount of noise that you're getting from the amplifier. And the Penrose isn't particularly noisy, but any amplification system will have more noise if you apply more gain and then cut in DSP or then boost in DSP. So it's just gonna cause more noise. So it's always a good idea to cut. And I also find that when it comes to bass frequencies, what cable is this? This is actually a ZMF cable I appropriated from a pair of Verite open backs that I have. Love Zach and Bev. They're friends of mine. They make great headphones. And yeah, they're super cool. Definitely check them out. very nice headphones. So I stole this cable from it because my amplifier is a SPL Phonitor XE, and it has a balanced out, and I like the sound of it with my 2s better. And I didn't have my other balanced Audeze cable is being used with my 4Zs at the moment, so I didn't feel like swapping them around. Yeah, it is. It's a ZMF silver cable. So anyways, like I was saying, the bass, for example, isn't just about. It's not just about the headroom, because a driver is only ever going to have a certain amount of pressure that it can put out into a space, whether it's a room or a headphone ear cup or whatever. And I personally like my bass to kind of be in that place where it's like just pressurizing the space, but it's not overloading things. Because if it kind of sounds like things are overloaded, even if you're not distorting the transducer, there's only essentially so much bass compression that a given space, again, an ear cup, a room, whatever, can handle. So by leaving the bass untouched and cutting other frequencies, you can actually sometimes get punchier bass performance without having some of the downsides that boosting bass can sometimes get into, which is, again, compression, distortion, things like that. So in the absence of being able to boost bass past a certain level, I like to try and cut other frequencies in a way that will retain the punchiness of the bass. So hopefully that makes sense. So learning to work with the auto gain function of EQ is going to be a big thing in EQing your Penrose and creating presets. And then also understanding how different frequency ranges work. So for example, the 8 and 16 kilohertz frequency ranges aren't going to deal so much with fundamental frequencies like the actual sounds, but they're going to deal with the harmonics, the little localization cues, the sense of space, right? They're going to give you that sense that you're in, this giant technological future, industrial complex, or that you're in a giant cathedral, or, something like that, or in a cramped tavern. So those frequencies, right, cutting or boosting those is going to make those feel closer or more distant, right? Going to enhance, if you boost them, is going to enhance the sense of resolution and the sense of space. Is cutting in EQ also better than boosting when working with a hi-fi set? Just pick EQing headphones. Yeah, so generally, even for hi-fi, and anything that I mention here is also applicable. It's just general EQ and gain and filter theory. Simplified a bit from, the super techie stuff, but it's also going to apply. There's no free gain, right? There's no real free lunch anywhere. So you're going to want to make sure that, we are not doing well. You're going to want to make sure that you are kind of generally trying to not boost too much in any setup. Cutting is almost always better, right? If you're like, all right, well, there's not enough 1 kilohertz energy, what you should do is cut at 500 and cut also at 2K, right? And that's going to give you the perception of more 1 kilohertz frequency, but also retain the, we did okay. Wow, barely. But it's also going to retain the sense of headroom and make sure that you have like lower noise when EQing. Some people also in hi-fi generally are a little bit allergic to DSP, so they feel that, filtering, which any kind of EQ is a filter essentially, should be kept to a minimum, and cutting for a variety of reasons is higher resolution in the digital domain. So if any of you are super tech nerds here, what happens when you are EQing is you're filtering all the other bands, you are reducing the gain, you're readjusting the volume up or down, and then you are basically putting all the other bands back in on top of the filtered one, either in serial or parallel, and you're hearing all the bands filtered out, then all of the bands put back in with the one band that you left sort of being reduced or boosted in level. And what this does is it makes it so that you have to recalculate the bit word length every time you adjust gain, which does lose you resolution technically. Now in practice, this is not something that's like super obvious, but if you listen to EQ for a long time, you'll start to hear that with low quality digital EQs, you might sometimes hear a lowering of resolution when you EQ, you know, when you EQ headphones. Oh geez. So it's generally a good idea to cut, because cutting, rather than trying to add artificial gain in DSP, it's just going to be higher resolution to cut. That's a more advanced topic in EQ, which we can go into later, you know, in relation to like maybe some hi-fi related stuff on the YouTube channel or in streaming, or if people are just interested in that. But generally, oh wow, we are getting annihilated. But generally, it's always best to cut for that reason, because it is, you know, higher resolution. Some of that is theoretical, but I try to stick to it just because I'm a music production nerd. And if you're doing large amounts of gain control, cutting or boosting, generally cutting will give you more headroom and be higher resolution. This is also the reason why it's best to have physical volume control and to use a preamp and hi-fi system, or to use the volume control on whatever headset you're using. So convolutions for Penrose. Yeah, probably not. That's a lot of DSP. I don't know if we have quite enough DSP power in the headphone to do that. It would be cool. But yeah. So you have to basically, whenever you do a gain calculation, it's similar if you're familiar with like math stuff, but it's similar to recalculating pixel density or pixel nit whenever you render an image, which is why aliasing is again, this is super nerdy stuff, so if you guys are ultra bored, like, let me know. But that's why you get that's partially why you get aliasing, because you have to recalculate the bit word length every time you are changing the data, which is, you know, the gain structure is changing the data. So yeah, and cutting, again, less recalculation that has to happen because there's less processing that happens in cutting. The thing to know about EQ is, you know, in my opinion, and I'm not allergic to processing like some people are in hi-fi, but it's best to try and get things as good as you can without digital processing, and then use digital processing as gently as possible, so that you don't have to rely on it. Things that rely on too much digital processing generally are going to have, lesser resolution, acoustical, and our ear is very good at picking this out. This is actually kind of one of the mysteries of digital audio, is like our ear is pretty good at picking out when something is being processed in the analog or digital realms, which is why it's best to try and use digital processing where its strength is, and that's in being transparent at low volume levels. I find that I get the best audio quality when I do a little bit of tweaking at each stage rather than a big amount of tweaking in one stage. Again, I encourage everyone, of course, to use the actual analog volume control on their devices rather than the digital volume control in Windows, for example, because it's generally going to be higher resolution for that same reason relating to bit word length. Related to convolutions, actually, I don't know if you're into music production, but if you are, we do work with Embody, the company Embody, which creates HRTFs and simulations of virtual rooms, which is kind of in the same realm of the impulse responses, although a bit more sophisticated because it's also taking into account, you know, the shape of your ear and some of that kind of stuff. Man, we are not doing well in this game. Impulse responses are also very DSP heavy. They require a lot of calculation, and there's always a relationship between how many samples of latency you take and how much processing speed or power you take up. So if you use more CPU, you can get lower latency. If you take up more, samples of latency, you can usually get, less processing speed. But then, of course, you've got samples of latency. So that was actually a big challenge in designing the Penrose, because we were trying to balance it so that we were staying under that 20 millisecond delay, which 20 milliseconds is where generally the untrained ear detects picture sync detachment. So if you have 22 milliseconds of latency, or just over 20 milliseconds of latency, that's generally where your ear is going to be able to pick up a lack of sync between audio and video. So getting it under 20 milliseconds was kind of its own unique challenge. And it's part of the reason why Mobius has a little bit more latency, because the processing that it runs is quite sophisticated and does take samples of latency. Physical tuning and headphone design reaches supreme as long as it changes the resolution, sound said. Yeah, exactly right, Metal 571. You still have to have a basically good design. You can do some pretty amazing things with kind of relatively less expensive designs, and using DSP to try and take them up to a certain level, but there's still that saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad transducers in a bad enclosure, whether it's for headphones or speakers, it's just not going to sound as good as one that's been well designed from the ground up and then uses DSP to enhance it, right? Rising tide lifts all ships. We can take it from great to awesome, or we can take it from like mediocre to like decent. But I think most of us would rather have great to awesome rather than mediocre to decent. It's impressive that we can go from mediocre to decent. But I think, especially at Audeze, we're more interested in, taking things from great to awesome. And that's kind of our general approach to using DSP, is we still want it to sound good. Penrose, without any DSP, without any EQ, anything like that, will still sound great. Mobius, without using the inbuilt presets, or even without the 3D audio, should still sound very good. And that's always been our goal, just because we believe in quality over quantity. Yeah. And it's interesting. I've seen some opinions online that planar magnetic driver design is like done and over, and it's easy and cheap, and this is like a simple thing to do at this point. And in a certain sense, we do understand some things a lot better, and things like manufacturing consistency, which were very difficult with electrostatic and planar magnetic drivers early on, have come a long way. But there is still a lot of boundaries to be pushed. We're, I can't say anything about it, but we're working on some very cool projects in the future that, kind of blew my mind. And I was like, whoa, how did you do that technologically? So there's a lot of boundaries still left to explore. There's a lot of cool tech things, and some things that are very simple that require enormous amounts of resources and actually are really sophisticated that we haven't managed to do yet, even though they seem like they should be relatively simple things to do. Right, they rely a lot on DSP to sound good. And I haven't heard them. I'm not going to comment on them. We love Apple products. Apple's cool. I think that, though, for us, the optimal way to look at design is, again, from that ground up standpoint, and also from solving basic problems. There's some basic things about driver technology that really are quite complicated, right? Getting impedance and efficiency numbers to levels where you can have a headphone that sounds good at across, evenly across frequencies and be efficient is difficult. Voice coil and driver magnet design is still a very complicated topic, and things don't always react how you would think they do. It's trickle down of space grade film for drivers into the cheaper punch modes. That's what we're trying to do with Penrose and Mobius and LCD1 actually. LCD1 has actually a very good. It doesn't have the dynamic impact of our bigger drivers, which is part of just they're bigger drivers, but the frequency response on that headphone is actually, I think, very impressive for the price point and for the size, especially. What it's possible to do at that size is very difficult in relation to getting a frequency response that's that clean. And I bought a pair of LCD ones before I ever worked for Audeze, and used them to produce on well before I ever even knew the folks at Audeze. Also, just the acoustics of the ear cups and things like that. There's some very minor tweaks that I've seen Dr. C, our head tech dude, do that totally changed the way a headphone sound, even though the parameters he was tweaking were relatively minor. It was quite cool. And like I said, there's still a lot of boundaries to be pushed. and it's not as easy as people think. It's not just a matter of slapping a pair of decent measure drivers in a reasonable enclosure. It's complex, and also part of the reason you see some manufacturers who have relatively slow to update lines. For a while it seemed like a headphone coming out every month back 5 or 6 years ago, and now that pace has slowed down considerably because we're starting to hit some of these limits where things are more difficult to advance because the technology's gotten really good, but there's also still a long ways to go. The trickle down of space grade film for drivers, blah, 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 blah. I actually met a guy who used to, I'll have to tell this story in a sec after I answer some questions. Audeze Sound Research Labs. That would be super cool. There's some really crazy stuff about measurements that I think a lot of the community doesn't realize are very difficult to do. And it's not just for transducers either. It goes for electronics as well. There's some very basic things about how electronic circuits work and how we hear that not even Harman has the money to do. Like, you would need someone like Apple to spend billions of dollars constructing a very sophisticated sound research lab to investigate some of these things. And so our measurements and our understanding of measurements is very flawed. And there's a lot of complicated, we don't really know what to measure yet, actually. We have some idea that certain things correspond with certain elements of sound, but our ability to measure audio equipment at this moment is actually very unsophisticated compared to our understanding of how broad and complex the ear structure is, and the ear's ability to synthesize sound. And I do mean synthesize sound because your ear creates, you should look up autoacoustic emissions if you're interested in how your ear processes sound. It actually creates sound in reaction to sound and uses that basically as almost a sort of form of sonar to like EQ and compress your ear. So your ear is literally a producer. It's like constantly changing what you hear based on what it's receiving and what it's doing in reaction to that and to the environment that you're listening in. So it's very cool. This is also, another reason why, again, this is complicated and measurements are sort of sticky, and it's not easy to get into nuts. It's not easy to get into all of this. How you can quantify what resolution is. Yeah, that's actually one thing that just speaking as, Grover Neville and not for Audeze, I disagree with Dr. Olive's research, is that he says sound quality can absolutely be defined by accurate frequency response. And we know that that's just not true. And I don't mean that as like an opinion. That's just a fact. Like, we have THD and IMD and distortion numbers, right? Like we can measure distortion. Now, what the effect of that distortion is, or how it sounds, or whether or not THD is more pleasing than IMD or second harmonic or things like that, is all, more complicated. But it's just not true that resolution is not, that resolution is measured by frequency response. Accurate frequency response heavily affects perceived resolution, but gain structures and distortion are also well researched. So we do think the Harman curve here at Audeze is a good target curve. We use it we take it into consideration. I can't speak to exactly if that's something we design around, or if it's just, I know it's something we take into consideration though. And the Penrose, for example, is almost perfectly matches the Harman curve, and was tuned to be very close to the characteristic Harman over-ear response. So that was an intentional thing on our part. We think it's a cool curve. The research that he did is actually incredibly cool because it solves, well, maybe not solves, but it addresses something which is actually a very fundamental issue with a lot of scientific studies, not even just in audio, but just in general, because he took into account not only a large focus group of listeners, but if you read the study, the way that he addressed listener preference is actually very revolutionary. Yes, yeah. And you can hear, play a 1 hertz 1 kilohertz sine tone. If you have like a DAW or something like that, play 1 kilohertz sine tone, right? And then play a 1 kilohertz sine tone with, you know, 10% or 20% THD, second harmonic. It'll be very clear very quickly that you're hearing distortion. Like it's very easy to hear. Now, musical signals are way more complicated than test tones, but distortion, you know, you can make a driver that measures really well, but has terrible distortion. So yeah, it's important. Now, the other thing, I think what's more interesting is if you design a headphone that through testing and development ends up being something that has a good frequency response or has a response that matches the Harman curve, is that going to tend to give you something that has good distortion numbers? I think that's kind of an interesting concept, right? Because the Harman curve, at least my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you are going to generally see like a flat frequency response at the outer ear will generally tend to look kind of similar to a Harman curve response at the pinna or at the inner ear. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I think that's roughly correct. So what I am interested in is, like, is that a function of how our ears hear transducers that are close to the ear, right? Like, is that a function, like, if you were to tune, you know, a perfectly planar wavefront or driver in a great acoustic environment, is that going to tend to give you better distortion numbers, or only as a result of the perceptual frequency response? So that's something that I'm interested in from an acoustic standpoint. I don't know if we have an answer to that, but I agree with you. And also, right, we can measure and have some idea of like transient distortion. Oh no, this is going terribly. We can measure and have some idea of transient distortion and damping factor, which address how we. Oh geez, these guys are creaming us. Has been beyond. Yeah. The headphone is really interesting. I've not heard them, but I know some friends who have them, and I've seen the frequency response charts. What's your impression of how they sound? Chaotic Canine Culture. CK9. I'm gonna call you CK9. Because I'm interested to. I've heard some. Those have been really popular, and I've seen a lot of them. So I'm curious to know what people think of them. Everybody left the team. Look, we're plumbing the depths of, you know, acoustical science. It's not easy to play Overwatch. Into the headphone show with Resolve for an audio science viewer. Yeah, I actually, I mean, we were gonna do that. We were working on doing that and getting some videos filmed with Dr. C, because he's really smart. And he is able to speak to this stuff. He's very funny, but he's also able to speak to this stuff with an incredible degree of, obviously, expertise. COVID kind of threw a wrench in some of those plans. So we're trying to sort of maybe figure out a way that we can more safely, you know, get him on camera and talking about this stuff, because it's really cool, and he has some really great insight into that. So we're working on it. We'll definitely, hopefully, have more information and be able to get him in front of you guys soon. So hopefully we can do that. We were swamped for a while with Penrose stuff. As I've mentioned before, you know, we're a small company. We're not a big company, so we have limited resources. But we'll try and get Dr. C talking to you guys about this soon, and try and get more tech articles out. So definitely something that's been on my agenda to get to. Brighter than the LCD sound stage is a bit further out too. Okay, yeah, that kind of lines up with what I've heard. Yeah. And Sankar is incredibly smart. He's super, you know, knowledgeable and smart about stuff. But of course, Dr. C being the CTO and the dude who actually is like the expert in planar magnetic technology, I think would be really cool. So as I mentioned, that's kind of something that's on my agenda, and I will work on getting some Dr. C interviews for you guys. phasing pressure issue. Interesting. Those, I believe, use like an AMT driver, which is roughly based on sort of a variation of a ribbon driver. Now, there's something interesting that happens with ribbons, and this is true of ribbon mics as well. I actually have one right here. This is a Sammer Audio ribbon mic. But there's something interesting that happens with ribbons because they behave in a transient and damping sense a little bit like dynamics, where there's like a real sense of like moving air. If you've ever heard Magnapans or like Martin Logan's, they sound really good, but there's like a weird sense that they're not pressurizing the room in the same way as a dynamic driver. And some people really like that. They're very like ethereal sounding, but it's kind of funky. Now, obviously, because planar magnetic headphones are just closer to your ear, you don't quite get. They can pressurize the space a little bit easier, but it's an interesting sound, and it's a transient difference, I think, and also a sound pressure level difference because there's just less sound pressure, which kind of makes the efficiency numbers on those speakers not as informative as it is for a dynamic speaker. And that, again, that's why like measurements are flawed, right? They don't necessarily even work for all transducer types. And we're just healing each other. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'd be interesting to know. I mean, we have a stream on Friday and some things like that, but definitely like let us know what you think, because I'm curious about this. I'm fascinated by why certain drivers, behave this way and certain other ones don't. I'm very sensitive to active noise canceling pressure, like that sense of pressure in your ears from active noise canceling. And I've noticed some transducer types, for me, just personally, do seem to have more like weird, unpleasant sources of things or things that I find pleasing, or punchiness or dynamic characteristics that are separate from the frequency response. So that's always something that I have thought was really interesting and kind of fascinating. And again, something that measurements have a more difficult time maybe explaining, or the measurements we currently do have a more difficult time explaining. Yeah. Oh, jeez. The air really moves in the head. So much space in them, which the walls and there's LCDs. Yeah, yeah. And of course, more space is gonna have a different response, a frequency response. So, and the distance between the driver and the ear is something that's quite important and has to be taken into a lot of consideration when designing a headphone. Something like an HD800, right? Part of the reason it has such that wide, airy, open frequency response is because of the design of the ear pads. I actually have a pair of modded HD800s that have I've done a lot of things to them, but if you change the pads, just swapping the pads on them gets you a lot more bass immediately. So there's a lot of interesting things. Generally I think, again, I could be totally wrong about this, but I think moving the driver closer to the ear is going to give you a generally flatter frequency response at the cost of that sense of spaciousness and some dynamic impact. And also, of course, AMT drivers have that because they kind of squeeze the air is how they work. They're going to have closer to like a dynamic driver sense of like pressure, because they're pressurizing the space more. Whereas a planar magnetic driver, it's like a planar wavefront of sound moving and hitting your ear, but it doesn't necessarily move as much air because it's just a diaphragm. It's just a mylar film, moving back and forth. It doesn't necessarily push a lot of air. Oh no, we won? What? I don't know how we're pulling these victories out of the. This is crazy. Yeah. I actually really like the ZMF pads. I used to use them when I was modding headphones a lot. I did this was a while ago, but I did there was the SDR mod for HD800s. I did that, and then there was also a Dynamat mod that I did for HD800s. But I think the biggest difference that I found with the HD800s was when I put ZMF pads on them. And so yeah, I like the ZMF pads. They're cool. They're great pads, and Zach is a really nice guy. But yeah, the closer ones seem to have it flattens out and it smooths out the frequency response, but it does seem to have less depth. So, and that's something that I noticed about the LCD4s against the 4Zs, is the LCD4s seem to have a depth to them, whereas the 4Zs have a similar frequency response, and they sound really good. But I think partially, you know, the higher impedance and the, or the lower impedance on the 4Z and the Roadhogger tend to give it a more upfront sound. So, yeah, it's just different. I mean, some people like the more upfront sound. It certainly works better if I'm like mixing or mastering stuff, or working on like composing. But the depth of the 4s is really nice for like hi-fi listening, or if I'm doing like really kind of hi-fi oriented audio, where it's like the depth and the sense of space is really important. Wow, that was a lot of tech talk. Hopefully you guys aren't bored. I find this stuff kind of interesting, but that's just me. Oh, we gotta back up. Oh, jeez. Magnesium chassis for the full LCD4. Well, I'm not going to say anything about that. Missed. LCD MX4s and the heads for my reference pair mixing struggling, so because they're really too powerful but different beasts. Yeah. So do you use the reveal plugin? I'm just curious. Yeah, I meant to want to keep all of them now. I know that problem. I have too many headphones. I have so many, you know, like Focal Utopias and Ether 2s and a pile of Audeze headphones, pairs of EMFs here and there. It's bad. I need to get rid of some. I've been trying to downsize a little bit, so. Wait, what was that? Reset? Oh, you can reset the ball. I didn't know that. Interesting. So I feel you on that one. Too many pairs of headphones. Like I mentioned, though, I am curious if you use a reveal, and you know, what DAW are you working in, and if you find reveal helpful. I don't necessarily use the embody stuff all the time when I'm mixing, but I definitely use reveal when I'm mixing with Audeze headphones because I do find it helpful. Never heard of Reveal, but I've been trying Canoper. Oh, I like Canoper too. It's a really good plugin. So I would say if you're using the MX4s and your DAW has plugin space on the master bus, or if you use Reaper and you have a monitor bus, which super awesome feature, try out Reveal. It's on our website. You can download it for free. I'll drop the link in chat in just a second after I die, which is probably going to be soon. It basically equalizes all of our headphones to the same, yep, there it is, target frequency response. Oh, yeah, nice. Thank you, Metal. We're glad you like the LCD1 preset. I actually really like the LCD1 presets in preset in Reveal. I like all the presets in Reveal. I find them super neutral, super useful. Yeah, it's awesome. Can't say enough good things about them. And again, I was using it before I ever worked for Audeze, so like, I know I probably sound like some sort of paid shill or something like that, but really, I do use them. I was mixing a movie score last week and like used it in all the headphone work I did. I just personally, I do use it. I think it's cool. Logic X, always mixing monitors. Singles. Wow, fancy. Album has gone platinum with singles. Congrats, that's awesome. But yeah, so, and the other cool thing about Reveal is that it's supposed to equalize all of our headphones to a target frequency response, which, means, in theory, I haven't really tested this out, but in theory, that you can, oh no, what's happening? Which means, in theory, you can use any of our headphones and get a relatively similar frequency response, no matter where you are. And the Reveal plugin is free, too, so... Let me jump out of Overwatch for a hot second and get you. Don't hate me for going AFK. Reveal plus. There it is. Should be dropped in chat. There's some cool HRTF features with like the embody thing and stuff like that. So you can check those out too if you think they're interesting. But just the basic Reveal I use, like I said, all the time on whenever I'm using my Audeze headphones for mixing, mastering, producing, composing, all that kind of stuff. I think, oh no. Yeah, absolutely. Considering I'm doing so poorly in Overwatch. What singles did you mix, if I may ask, if you're allowed to say? Because that's interesting. And I do like Can Opener. It's got like kind of a clean sound. My problem with a lot of the I like SonarWorks for my speakers, but my problem with the Can Opener, or not Can Opener, my problem with the SonarWorks headphone profiles is that they're often too aggressive and they have a little bit of a processed sound to them, and they add a little bit of latency and things like that. Oh, nice. Well, link your channel. I'd love to check it out. Drop it in the chat if you don't mind. Oh yeah, clutch Junkrat. But yeah, I've had some experiences, but Can Opener was very clean because it wasn't trying to be like, super processed in any one way. Always when I ult, it gets stunned. Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna Chaotic Canine Culture. Sweet, I'll check it out. And yeah, I mean, if you're a creator and you'd like to make some content sometimes with us, like do a Zoom interview about your work or talk about cool stuff or whatever, I'd love to do that. So I'll hit you up after the stream. That would be cool. If you're interested, send me an email at grover@audeze.com, because we love to work with our partners who use our headphones and, talk about what they do and show that off, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, can't say enough good things about Reveal. And I think in general, my take on it is a lot of people have different opinions, like NS10s, or they like things that are bright, or they like things that are, whatever way. My take on mixing is generally, I want something that's as linear as possible, as close to flat frequency response as possible. And my reasoning for that is that it's going to sound best on the most number of systems if you are getting a relatively balanced frequency response. I like mixes that have a little bit of like a almost B and K curve, like a slight downward tilt. Yeah, please do. Like I said, Grover at Audeze.com. Send me an email and let's get in touch. I'd love to make some content or do an artist interview with you or something like that. I make pretty much most of the content for Audeze, so I'd love to chat. Here, I'll drop my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out. I should probably window this game, but whatever. Anyways, yeah. So my take is I always like to try and have as neutral frequency response as possible. But if I were to have to choose, I would say that a slightly dark or a slightly smooth upper mid-range and treble response is kind of what I might choose over something that's a little brighter. Just because I know that my mixes are never going to turn out dull that way, which is important for anything pop music related or kind of mainstream. And then the other bit that I think is important is listening fatigue. I can't mix on NS10s. I mean, I can if I have to, but like I hate them. They sound like trash. They sound like trash can lids. I think that there's like sort of a thing they do in the mid-range that's kind of revealing because it leaves out information from other frequency bands. But like for me, if you mix something that's relatively neutral, like, and you get transient clarity and dynamics, it's gonna sound good on a phone, on earbuds, on anything like that. I mix on my monitors are ATC speakers with my own amps, and they're super clean. They're not like maybe the most fun thing to listen to from a hi-fi perspective, but they're super clean and they're super flat, and I have room correction and things like that going on. And my mixes always sound good on everything from earbuds to movie theater systems to iPhones. You can play it off an iPhone and it'll still sound good. So I think that getting, your frequency ranges massaged the right way is more important than like, oh, I can really hear a ton of detail in, this frequency response because my speaker has like a, elevated response in that region. Like, it just doesn't, maybe it works for some people, but it's just not my preference. I prefer to hear something punchy and smooth and even across all frequency responses, because I'm always aiming, like I said, for that kind of like falling B and K curve. Like I like mixes that have a lot of bass, but are still smooth and have, revealing quality in the treble. Somebody save me. No. Yeah. And the other thing too is headphones give you a ton of detail. They are microscopes. So, that's kind of something that I mix on headphones a lot nowadays too. And I love doing it because I get tons of resolution. Now, soundstage is not as good, so I'll always check the soundstage on my speakers, but so many people are also listening on headphones, especially if you're doing primarily music, like 2-channel music. So many people are listening on headphones, like, you gotta make it sound good on headphones. If the panning sounds weird on headphones, but it sounds fine on speakers, for me, I'm like, nope, gotta go back and fix it, because I just know so many people are gonna be listening to it on earbuds that gotta have it good there, I also think that a lot of pro audio people, this is going to be kind of shady, just my opinion. This is not an official Audeze stance, but my personal kind of shade is that I think that a lot of pro audio guys have gotten used to mixing on like kind of bad monitoring systems, like just distorted, poor frequency response, things like that. And I don't think that every mixer or producer has to have an amazing hi-fi system, but I do think it helps if you're trying to make music that sounds good. And most pop music, it's not meant to sound good, it's meant to sound loud, right? But if you want to make stuff that sounds good, I think your monitoring has to sound good itself, or you're not going to know what sounds good. You're going to know what sounds a certain way on, monitors. But that's just my take. Super shady. Feel free to call me out for it. but that's just, I'm also an audiophile and like a nerd, so, you know, that's just me. Looks like we've got a couple minutes left after this game. This game will probably be the last one. So I have to do some other stuff, like make videos and important things. Also, a super secret errand I can't talk about today. So if you guys have any last questions, comments, I'm going to throw some links to your channels or your stuff. Let me know. Drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah. If you want more nerd talk about EQ or other things that are not EQ, we can do that too. Poke, poke, poke. Oh god. Oh no. Oh no. This is I feel like it's like we're doing bad, but we're also doing okay. Maybe I'm just doing bad. Perhaps a new methodology is required. Get into position. Oh boy. Oh no. Whoa. This is much easier when you're not talking about tech, really in-depth, detailed tech stuff, I must say. That. Oh no. Yay. Also, for anyone curious, the nope. I totally trailed off there. I lost my train of thought. Oh, and I died. Yeah. Again, this will probably be my last game. Usually we stream for an hour and a half. But today there's some errands for super secret stuff that I can't talk about yet. And, yeah. It's cool. There's some cool stuff coming. I'm also really excited about making the gaming presets because, like, it means I get to play games, and you know, playing games when you work, always great. Never a bad thing. This is probably a terrible time to ult, but I'm doing it anyways. Do any of you in the chat have Penroses? Have you tried out the EQ presets? Do you think we're deaf? Are they cool? Let us know if you do. Don't let us know if you think we're deaf. We know we're deaf. No, I'm just kidding. Jesus. I know you all don't show up to watch me fumble my way through Overwatch with a controller. I know that's not why we're here. This diva is a menace. Jesus. Oh. It'd be fun to play with the sampling. I don't send out comp units, so ask someone else. It's cool though. It's actually I use it a lot for my consoles. I should use it more for my computer, but I have my like silly complicated setup that I like. But I do use it a lot for my consoles. My roommate uses it a lot too, because if he wants to like play video games late at night, he's not much of a PC gamer, but he plays a lot of PlayStation. So we use it a lot for that, as like TV headphones. Why me? And it's cool. It's got some neat features. I've seen a lot of people kind of complain about the mic quality. I'm not exactly sure why. We have an update that addressed that, so I think maybe people just haven't been updating. Update your Penrose if your mic sounds weird. It shouldn't. Stop. And also, you know, wired mode on the mic sounds a lot better. But the mic is, I think, surprisingly good, especially in wired mode. It's like you could do a podcast with it, and it would. Oh no. Oh geez, we're doomed. Yeah. So that's another thing is like the Mobius has so many cool, interesting features. If you play games with that support the head gestures, there's actually a lot of really cool stuff you can do with that. And also something that I don't think I've ever seen any publication mention is the head gestures and features of the Mobius are actually really helpful if you're a disabled gamer. So you can use them if you maybe have a disability to help you. And alongside, you know, a lot of the cool controller support that's available now for alternatively able controllers, I think is the PC term. Don't murder me if I don't remember all the correct terms for these. But like some of the controllers from Microsoft that are like more customizable and useful for disabled gamers is it can pair very well with the Mobius for gaming. So that's a really cool element of it. And then yeah, like you mentioned, it's just a very, very good sounding Bluetooth headphone. A lot of Bluetooth headphones have a lot of compromises, but I use it just as a Bluetooth headset a lot of the time, actually. Whoops, not mean to enter another game. I don't even have LDAC, but it still sounds good even without LDAC. Loot boxes. All right, we're gonna open our loot boxes, and then I'm gonna sign off for now. So if you guys have any last comments, questions, if you want to tell me that I suck at Overwatch, I know. I used to be good. And then I got busy. I went to college. And real life came along. And now I'm not as good at video games anymore. And it kind of sucks. Feels bad, man. Feels bad. Game over, man. All right. Hold on. Let me borderless windowed. Apply. Okay. Hopefully our frames won't take a hit from that. I've got a 3090. Should be fine. Yeah, please stop by. I mean, it's more fun when there's folks like you to chat with, especially when I recognize you. So thanks for stopping by and chatting with me. I know an Audeze stream is probably not like the most exciting. You're like, wow, go to Twitch and watch an Audeze stream. That sounds ultra lame. So I'm glad you guys stopped by. I had fun. I love super nitty gritty tech talk and like talking about like I'm into headphones. I'm into the community. I'm into the stuff. So like, let's talk about it. Yeah. Thanks for stopping by. Wednesdays at 1, Fridays at 3 Pacific. So definitely stop by. It's nice to see familiar names, and I had a lot of fun. So hopefully all of you have happy holidays. Have a nice new year. 2020 is finally over. Woo! And yeah, I'll see you next stream, I hope. Have a great day, guys. Yeah, and I'll check out your channel and shoot me an email, chaoticK9. I would love to chat with you. I'm gonna open this right now. Bye.